Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever wondered who really owns and controls America?
Hmm.
Is it like some secret group pulling the strings? Central banks,
Or
maybe?
those mega landlords you hear about?
Yeah, the Emersons, Bill Gates even, or
Mhm.
maybe the tech giants with all our data.
It's a deep rabbit hole for sure.
It feels like it. And our mission today is to dive into these different kinds of control. We're talking land, money, corporations, debt, political influence.
And how they've shifted over time.
Exactly. Get ready for, I think, some unexpected stuff, some real aha moments, hopefully.
Yeah, indeed. That rabbit hole, it goes much wider and deeper than most people probably think.
Right.
And because there isn't just one answer, that's why looking at all these different facets is so important.
Okay.
You need to untangle them, see the connections from history right up to today, and really spell out why each piece matters to you.
So let's dive right in then. Where do we start? Land. Right. That feels like the original source of power, especially back in the 19th century.
Absolutely. Land was foundational.
The sources point to the Pacific Railway Act of 1862. Congress gave away public land.
A staggering amount, 174 million acres,
Mhm.
given to the Union Pacific and Central Pacific Railroads.
Wow, 174 million. That's
Yeah.
huge. We're talking vast stretches of the country.
Mm-hmm. And then comes the really interesting part, the part that shows the mechanics of influence back then.
Okay.
Union Pacific insiders, they set up the separate company, the Credit Mobilier Construction Company.
Ah, I've heard of this scandal.
Right, and they quietly started giving out discounted shares, sometimes even free shares of this company,
To who?
to key congressmen, powerful figures, basically buying influence.
So they get friendly laws and, well, money, funding.
Exactly. When it all came out in 1872, it just blew the lid off how deeply these land grants were tied to politics
Uh-huh.
and how corporations could basically get control over huge new territories that way.
So land was like the first big lever for corporate power over politics in the U.S.
You could definitely argue that. And what's fascinating is that pattern, using assets to gain influence. It echoes today, doesn't it?
How so? Does land still matter that much?
Oh, absolutely. That influence hasn't vanished. If you connect the dots, you see a small group of, well, mega landlords still hold disproportionate power.
Really?
Yeah, not just over land, but local economies, local politics. Think about it. Private owners control about 1.3 billion acres. That's what, 60% of U.S. land?
60%.
The scale is just incredible. You've got families like the Emersons with over 2.4 million acres, John Malone over 2.2 million.
Wow.
And there's that modern twist, too, like you mentioned, Bill Gates.
Right, the farmland.
Over 200,000 acres across 18 states. His Mount Edna Farms LLC in Nebraska alone controls over 20,000 acres.
Okay, but what's the concern there? Is it just that he owns a lot?
Well, the public concern, and it's a valid one, is about taxes. If large land holdings like that manage to get tax-exempt status, it could really hit county property tax revenues hard. And that affects schools, local services, everything that relies on that money.
Gotcha. So it's not just owning dirt.
Not at all.
Oh.
It subtly shapes where tax money goes, maybe even how voting districts are drawn, how resources get allocated. It's still about influence.
Okay, so if land was the original power source, then credit, money. That feels like the next evolution, right? And its impact is global now.
Definitely. The control of credit is huge.
And the origin story of the Fed, it almost sounds like conspiracy theory, but the sources say it's basically factual. That secret meeting.
Yes, the Jekyll Island meeting in November 1910. It happened. Key bankers, J.P. Morgan, National City, First National Bank of New York reps, sponsored by Senator Aldrich.
And their goal was clear.
To hammer out a plan for central banking, which became the Federal Reserve Act, essentially to control the nation's money supply.
It makes you think of that Rothschild quote. Something like, give me control of a nation's money, and I care not who makes its laws.
That's the famous one. And while the Rothschilds were pioneers in central banking concepts, the source is clear. Despite all the theories, they supposedly don't own the Fed directly.
So who does own it then?
It's actually owned by its member banks, smaller commercial U.S. banks, technically.
Okay. And when the act passed in 1913?
December 1913, it created the 12 regional reserve banks and gave them this superpower, fractional reserve banking.
Right. Explain that simply, like the example in the source.
Yeah, basically, historically, if you put $100 in the bank, they had to keep a fraction, say $10 in reserve.
Okay.
But they could lend out the other $90. That $90 gets deposited somewhere else. The next bank keeps $9, lends out $81.
And it multiplies.
Exactly. That original $100 could potentially create, like, $1,000 in bank credit across the system. But here's the really mind-blowing change. Get this. March 2020,
Yeah, what happened?
the Fed dropped the reserve requirement to 0%.
Zero, so they don't have to hold any reserves.
Effectively, no mandated reserve based on deposits. They can lend out the maximum amount, obviously under the Fed's guidance and other capital rules, but that 0% requirement was a huge shift.
Okay, that's wild.
So today, the Fed has this immense balance sheet, over $6 trillion. That's not just a number, it's the financial assets they hold
And they use that too.
to influence everything. By buying and selling those assets, they move interest rates like the 10-year Treasury bond rate that sets your mortgage. They control the flow and cost of money, corporate credit, even the purchasing power of your paycheck through inflation.
And the president has no say, can't fire the Fed chair.
No direct control. Cannot fire the head over policy disagreements. It's independent.
So that raises a pretty big question, doesn't it? If a few banks, essentially, decide how many dollars get created and what they cost, but what does that mean for who's really in control?
It's a fundamental question about where power lies in the economy.
But couldn't you argue that independence is good? Like, it keeps politics out of monetary policy, lets them act fast in a crisis?
That's the standard argument, yes. And there's truth to it. Quick responses are possible. But the sources also highlight the flip side. It means a small group, unelected, makes decisions impacting every single American's finances.
Right. Without direct accountability to voters.
Exactly. It's this core tension, between efficiency and democratic control.
Okay, so we have land, we have money via the Fed. What about the stock market? Who controls that?
Ah, yes.
There's that popular idea about the Holy Trinity, right?
Yeah.
BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street.
Big asset managers.
Especially BlackRock. Larry Fink gets mentioned a lot. There's a lot of speculation around them.
There is.
And the source had this startling fact. BlackRock holds stock in, 95% of Fortune 500 companies.
That's the figure. And it's not just that. They've been hired by governments worldwide to manage crises, even handle day-to-day operations sometimes.
Wow. Makes you think of that Charlie Munger quote.
I think the world of Fink, but I'm not sure I want him to be my emperor. Yeah. It captures the unease.
So do they own corporate America then?
Well, here's where the nuance comes in, and it's important. What's fascinating here is that while they manage trillions, most of that money isn't theirs. It belongs to investors, like everyday people, you and me, through pensions, 401ks, mutual funds.
Okay, so they're managing it, not owning it outright.
Right. But, and this is a big but, their power and control are still immense, undeniable.
How does that work then, if it's our money?
Okay, think about how companies make decisions. A public company, say, wants to issue new shares, maybe like MicroStrategy buying Bitcoin. That decision usually comes from the board of directors. Sometimes shareholders vote if it's a big dilution. Now, who gets onto those boards? The shareholders.
And the big three hold huge chunks of shares.
Exactly. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, combined, they manage something like $23 trillion. They hold proxy votes for about 90% of U.S. stocks.
90%.
Which makes them major stockholders in, yes, 95% of American corporations.
Okay, explain proxy votes. That's when they vote for you.
Precisely. If you own an ETF like Vanguard's VTSAX or a mutual fund, chances are you're not personally showing up to vote at every company meeting.
Definitely not. Who has time for that?
Right. So the fund manager, often one of these big firms, gets your proxy, your permission to vote your shares on your behalf. So connect the dots. If just 3 firms hold the biggest voting blocks in almost every major company,
they can basically steer the direction of corporate America?
That's the implication. They influence everything from environmental policies to executive pay to labor practices. It's less about who technically owns the shares.
And more about who controls the votes that decide company policy?
Exactly. It's a huge concentration of influence in the boardroom. A subtle but really profound shift.
Okay, that's a lot of concentrated power. Now, shifting gears a bit, debt.
National debt.
If banks and corporations can borrow like crazy, and the country does too by selling treasury bonds, who does the U.S. owe all that money to?
It's a massive number.
The source said over $36 trillion in gross federal debt by the end of 2024.
That's right, around 120% of GDP.
Which means we owe more than our entire economy produces in a year. That affects every taxpayer, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's a structural weight on the economy. So who holds it?
Yeah.
About 80% is held by the public investors, funds, etc. The other 20% is intergovernmental, like Social Security holding treasury bonds.
Okay. And the public part.
Of that $29 trillion or so held by the public, foreign investors, other countries, foreign institutions hold about $8.5 trillion, roughly 30%.
Is that where the China and Japan thing comes in? That they own us?
That's the common rumor, yeah. They hold a big chunk together, about $1.8 trillion between them.
But the source says they couldn't just dump it all and crash the U.S.
Highly unlikely. Think about it. If they suddenly sold trillions in U.S. bonds, what would happen?
Bond prices would collapse. Interest rates would soar.
Exactly. And it would destroy the value of their own remaining holdings. Their economies are too intertwined with the U.S. and be shooting themselves in the foot, basically.
So who is the biggest single holder of U.S. public debt?
Surprise, surprise. It's our own Federal Reserve.
Back to the Fed.
Yep. Over $6 trillion on its balance sheet. They bought up huge amounts, especially during quantitative easing.
And other holders.
State and local government pension funds, commercial banks, insurance companies, even individual investors. If you own U.S. Treasury bonds or savings bonds,
Then you partly own America's debt and get paid interest.
right, you're lending money to the government. But here's the critical problem the source points out.
The unsustainable path.
Yeah. When debt gets this high relative to the economy, lenders start seeing it as riskier. They demand higher interest rates,
Which makes the debt cost even more to service.
creating this infinite feedback loop. It's like a treadmill. The government has to borrow more just to pay the interest on the old debt.
Which pushes rates higher, makes borrowing harder.
Wow. It makes future solvency a constant growing challenge. That's why, as the source notes, someone like former President Trump wanted lower rates to refinance the debt more cheaply.
Okay, so debt holders have this sort of quiet background control too.
Subtle but significant, yes.
Which brings us to politics. Given all these huge forces, land, money, corporations, debt, couldn't we just, vote in people to change the system?
That's the question, isn't it?
But the source basically says, good luck with that.
Haha. Well, it puts it bluntly. Turns out that's really hard to do, and money in politics is a big reason why.
Okay, give me the numbers. The 2024 election examples were stark.
They were. Just 100 billionaire families spent a record $2.6 billion in federal races.
$2.6 billion from 100 families. That's about a sixth of all spending.
Roughly, yeah. And the top 50 individual donors gave $2.5 billion, with Republican-leaning donors outspending Democrats about 2-to-1 in that top tier.
And specific examples, again, just reporting what the source said.
Right, impartiality is key here. The source mentioned Elon Musk donating hundreds of millions, mostly to Trump-related causes. Miriam Adelson gave over $100 million, largely to GOP groups. Timothy Mellon, $197 million, almost all to Republican super PACs.
Okay, but what about dark money? That sounds ominous.
It refers to money spent by nonprofits and shell corporations that don't have to disclose their donors. An estimated $1.9 billion in the recent cycles.
So you don't even know who's trying to influence things.
Correct. But again, it's not a one-sided issue. The source also highlights Democratic-aligned spending.
Like George Soros.
Yes. His Open Society foundations directed at least $140 million to various organizations in 2021. He personally gave over $170 million in the 2022 midterms.
And for 2024.
The source cited Soros' family funding for groups like the Texas Organizing Project, $600, and state Democratic parties in Wisconsin and Ohio, $250K each.
So huge money on both sides.
Massive amounts, which inevitably raises that crucial question.
How does this fire hose of cash affect who even decides to run for office? How politics actually works day to day?
And ultimately, who benefits? Who are the winners and losers decided by policies shaped by the spending? It subtly but powerfully shapes the whole landscape.
It really is a lot to take in. Land, money, corporate voting power, debt, political spending.
Multiple layers of influence.
So, circling back to the big question, who does control and own the country?
Well, the nuanced answer seems to be, it depends, right? It depends on what kind of control you're focused on.
Political, social, economic.
Exactly. And no single entity, no one group controls all of it. It's more fragmented, more complex than that.
For me, though, the source got me thinking about this idea of economic energy.
Ah, yes. The personal takeaway.
Yeah, like the money I earn represents my time, my skills, my energy converted into this form.
Right.
But someone else, like the Fed influencing inflation, has this kind of magic button that can just zap that energy away. Slowly, maybe, but it happens.
You feel it at the grocery store.
Totally.
Yeah.
The time I spent earning that dollar buys less. And the source says the wealthy figured out a workaround.
The concept of a store value instead of holding cash, which can lose value.
They convert that economic energy into something else. Stocks, real estate, art. Things that hopefully preserve that energy better over time.
Right, and that's why those assets often trade at a premium.
Meaning they cost more than just their basic utility.
Exactly. A fancy house isn't just shelter. Part of its high price reflects its perceived ability to hold or grow value to store that economic energy efficiently. People pay extra for that storage quality.
Okay, that makes sense.
Which leads us to this final provocative thought the source puts out there for you, the listener, to chew on. It builds directly on this idea of storing economic energy.
Okay, what is it?
Well, the source presents a pretty challenging idea, and again, we're just relaying it for you to consider and research further.
Not an endorsement. Got it.
Right. What if the best way to store that economic energy is evolving? What if there's something superior emerging outside the traditional systems we just talked about?
You mean like Bitcoin? The source went there.
It did. It presented the Bitcoin perspective as a potential superior store of value precisely because it aims to be decentralized outside those traditional control mechanisms.
How did they illustrate that?
They used examples like a famous Basquiat painting sold for $110.5 million in 2017. At the time, that was about 55,000 Bitcoins.
Okay.
But fast forward to mid-2025, with Bitcoin hypothetically at $117,000, that same painting would only cost 941 Bitcoins.
Whoa. So relative to Bitcoin, the painting lost 98% of its value.
That's the source's argument. They did a similar thing with real estate. Average U.S. house up 50% in dollars from 2016-2024.
Oh, relative to Bitcoin.
Lost 99% of its value in that time frame, according to their calculation. Even from 2020 to 2025, houses lost over 80% relative to Bitcoin.
That's a bold claim.
Extremely bold. The source claims Bitcoin is essentially draining the premium out of traditional assets like real estate and art because it's perceived by some as a better way to protect that economic energy over time, a superior form of energy storage.
Okay. So the final thought isn't necessarily buy Bitcoin.
But rather, it raises this important question for you. What are the potential benefits of these alternative decentralized systems? And if you truly value preserving the economic energy you generate from your time and skills?
What might you want to read into? What should you explore further for yourself?
Exactly. It's something to think about, to research on your own, especially in light of all the complex layers of control we've unpacked today.